Hi, I'm John Glynn. I'm going to be looking at the creation of Tiny World. Tiny worlds are pictures like this, where you will see your photographs turned into a circle. And it has become a very popular thing to do recently. So we'll go through the process of creating an image like this. What you need to do is start out with a set of standard photographs, which are all going to be taken of the same place at the same time in a complete circle. So you will plant your body at a particular point and then take an exposure reading. The best thing is in manual mode, an exposure reading using multi-reading, or the equivalent of multi-reading, which is a bit of everything. So it's the very first option that you would have in your exposure meter. So it'll read a bit of the sky, a bit of the ground, etc. And what I would advise to do would be to take a general view, reading of the general view of the brighter parts of the picture area. So whether it's sunny or brighter part of the picture area rather than the dullest part. Okay. And then you would make the exposure correct for that, so your needle and the exposure meter will be 0 effectively, or slightly under if you wished. Okay, so that would be your normal exposure. So here it should have been there, and it would be maybe a bit darker if I had thought about it, and a bit darker in the sky. It's not horrendous, but maybe a little bit darker wouldn't have gone amiss. But you're taking average reading and setting it on 0 on your exposure meter, and then leaving it in that reading. You take 11 or so pictures all in a complete circle. So you start at a given point, whatever that given point happens to be, and then you turn and take another picture, and you turn, take another picture, etc. And you allow for an overlap of each picture by around about 50%, so that the next picture in line will be overlapped by the next picture, etc., all the way round until you return to the beginning. I found that it was a good idea to use a wide angle lens for this, so it took in a large area rather than trying to zoom in on anything. But whatever focal length you decide to use, you should stay with the same focal length all the way through, otherwise it would look weirder still than it already does. Okay, once you've got your 11, 10, 12 pictures or whatever it's going to be in a complete circle overlapped, you would then come to a software package and put all your pictures that you're going to use into the computer, and ideally they're in some consecutive order, so number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 all the way up to 10 or 11 or whatever, and numbered accordingly, so they are consecutive, whether it's 12, 13, 14 or 101, 102, 103, etc. Doesn't really matter as long as they are consecutive. Okay, you can always renumber them if you wish to anyway by going to rename and give each picture a name, so you can call them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 if you wished. When they're all in here, what you're then going to do is go to well, in this version of Photoshop, what you're going to go to is File, and in this version of Photoshop I'm going to go to Automate, and under Automate I have Photo Merge, and a window will appear and it will say perspective or cylindrical. I've actually used cylindrical, so I click on cylindrical and blending images together, and I also tick content aware. Okay, this will mean that areas which would be transparent, if it can't find the perfect fit, the computer will effectively make it up and put something in it. So it will fill the area hopefully with information, and there won't be any blank areas of your picture. So if you have content aware, it does make life easier in the long term. You can use your files or as we have done here, open files. So I said add open files. The pictures I've got up at the top here are going to be listed here, and if I said OK, it would then try and join them all together into a, and I'll just bring it up in a second. I'm just going to close these pictures down, otherwise it gets too confusing if I have too many photos all open at the same time. It would put them into a panorama, and it does that. I'm going to show you the process here. It's reading a TIFF format. So I'd opened up JPEGs originally. I didn't change the JPEGs to TIFF, but when I came to save this particular point in the process, I've saved them as a TIFF because all the pictures are added one on top of the other in a layer. And in the layers palette you can see there's lots of layers, each picture is separate. However, you can see that it is one long image. Okay, so at this stage I've kept them as in their separate major components, and I've kept them as that as a TIFF file because that's one way of storing them with layers. I've then gone at this point and I've actually flattened them. So what I did do is go to layer and flatten image. So I've saved this as a version. I then flattened the image, so effectively there's only one and the layers have vanished, and I'm just going to undo that so that I don't accidentally save stuff I don't want to do. And what I have actually done is save it as a JPEG. So I have a flattened version of that picture here without all the layers. So I have the TIFF with layers saved separately from the flattened version, which is the JPEG version. Okay, you could of course do this all as TIFF if you so wished. I just think it speeds the process up very slightly if it's a JPEG. The file sizes are very big, by the way. This is 526 megabytes purely because you've got lots of pictures all joined together. Because it is content aware, all the areas are being filled by something that came from a picture before or after, so that the computer has amalgamated them all into one. What I then want to do is resize it. I need to resize the image, so I'm going to go to Image, Resize, and at this stage we're making sure that resample is ticked, and I've got it on pixels. You can do other things, percent, inches, centimeters, but I've left it on pixels, and I'm going to put the width the same as the height. So I'm going to put the width with the same number, so it's going to be 6864 in my version. In your version it will be different because it will be using a different camera. I'm going to leave the resolution at 300 because I may want to print it. If I put it at 72, it's only good enough for looking at on a computer monitor. So 6864, keep the resample ticked. I'm going to say OK, and it will convert it to a square photograph. It will be distorted, but we're not worried about that because we will be distorting the picture even more. Whether I keep it the right way round or whether I go to image, and in this version under image I can rotate and do 180 degrees and have it upside down, depends on how I want it to look in the final version. If I have it upside down, it will look like that. The sky will be on the outside of the land mass, which will be in the middle of the picture. If I have it the normal way round, so I undo that flip, for instance, so I go to I'll just undo, go to my history and just unflip it, it will look like that. The land will be on the outside and the sky will be on the inside. Okay, so you can either have it with the sky outside, that's with the picture flipped, or the picture left the normal way round, the sky will be on the inside. On this particular picture I felt the sky on the inside was better than on the outside. Okay, this is going to be something that you would have to decide when you came to actually do it. Now if I leave it as it is, I will be coming to turn it into a circle at this stage. So what I would want to do is go to filter and distort, and I'm going to use polar coordinates. So I'm going to have polar coordinates. So I click on polar coordinates and it's going to be rectangular to polar, which is its standard setting. I haven't changed anything here, and I say OK. And when I do that, I now get a circular picture. So I'll zoom in and you can see that it's a circular picture. Now what I'm also going to do now is cut out the circle, because it's not a square picture that I'm wanting. I'm actually wanting a circular picture. So to do that, I would go to my elliptical tool. On the toolbox on the left hand side you have elliptical, or you may have it rectangular. You don't want a rectangular picture, we're wanting a round picture, so elliptical. And I put my cursor on my photograph and I hold the shift key down on the keyboard, and if I hold the shift key down and drag at the same time, I get a perfect circle. There we are. And I can then move it by putting my mouse in the middle and move the circle around. I can also adjust the size of it. I'm just going to click the right mouse key. I'm using a PC, by the way, and I can do a free transform, and holding down the left mouse key I can drag and resize. You can also do transform. There we are, it's getting bigger, and I can adjust it a bit further if I wanted to, moving the picture around and sort of circle. And then I can say fine, in my version I just double click the left mouse key, but in some versions you'll have a little green tick that you tick to set it, and I now have my circular picture. And then I want to keep that as a circular picture, so what I'm going to do is go to layer, new layer, via cut. Okay, so when I cut it, I have both pictures. You think, oh, nothing's changed, but actually if you look at my layers palette, I now have two photographs, one on top of the other. If I turn off the background, I now have a see-through. It's not exactly circle. That's my fault, not lining up properly. But if I'd lined it up correctly, it would be completely circular all the way around and not cut, as I've got there, which I'll move. There we are. I've dragged it along. Okay, is a circular photograph. Okay, if I click the background, it comes back. I don't need that background. Okay, you could create a background and you'll have a white paper. So I can delete this background because I'm not actually going to use it again. So I could take it away, get rid of it, but I could actually put in a background. So I could go up and say, right, let's create a new blank layer, which is in this version. Create a new group. I just need to see where I am on this one. Oh, it's always very interesting when you're trying to create new layers in a layers palette, and things have changed slightly since I last looked at this program. Oh, here we are, create a new layer. I knew it was there somewhere. And what I want to do is I can turn off that one, and I can drag it down, turn off that one, and I can make it white if I wanted to. I could fill white. So if I do that, I can go to edit, fill. I'm going to use background color because it's white on my color. On the toolbox on the left hand side I've got a black box and a white box. White is background. I'm going to say OK, and it now becomes a white background to my to my circle. Okay, so I've got 2 layers still, but a background, and I could make it black if it suited, as I have done on one of my others. But there's my layer. I've got a background which is a white background and my picture on the top. I can now zoom in, and you'll notice that when you zoom in there are going to be aspects of your picture which will need to be removed. Okay, there's stuff going on here which is because of the duplication of the 2 pictures being joined together. The computer has put them across one picture across another, and there might be problems here as well with where the joins are. Joins are a problem, obviously, so you will have to do some adjustment, and that will be using the clone stamp tool. Probably the clone stamp tool is probably one of the better ones, and you may have other choices. For instance, the healing brush can also work, and you may find for some things the healing brush is a better one to use. If I take this guy and I it's gone to the wrong layer. You must make sure you're on the right layer, of course, otherwise it won't work. And you can just start playing around, and it might well fit it in, taking stuff out. You will always know that you've been working on stuff. Whether anybody else will notice is less likely, and you zoom in to make any changes, by the way. The more you zoom in, the more accurate your changes are, but also they're done at such a large magnification pixel level that you have more control over those changes, and they are less likely to be noticeable when you do a normal size picture. So resizing your brush, and also using parts of the picture, and it might be that it hides it better. You may find that using the clone stamp tool might help. So it's a matter of just working your way around until you remove the elements in your picture that you feel shouldn't be there, or if they are there may make people look at your photograph and think, that's weird, something odd is happening in the photograph, and you don't want any lines or anything for people to pick up on as a pattern. We are very likely to pick up on patterns, so we want to get rid of weird lines in the picture which people would look at and go, something was there, because I can see an edge. Okay, so you want it so it blends in as much as possible. Now we do have this other edge on this particular picture, so a definite edge between one image and the next. We would need to fuzz that in some way, and again it might be a mixture of using various brushes to try and hide the fact that it's bleeding over. A bigger brush might give you more control as well in this, or hide it more. Anything to try and hide the fact that there are issues. You don't want any funny edges appearing, admittedly, so you just have to be very careful where you take your edges from, otherwise you're going to end up copying over stuff you don't want to copy over. You're going to, so it has to be so it hides it as much as possible. And if you zoom in, as I said, zooming in more gives you more control. There's 2 pictures here, so that edge is another picture, by the way, so you just have to be aware of that. So you'd work on it, and it may be other brushes, some of them can work really well and others don't, so it's a matter of trying to find out if they actually do anything. Some of them won't work at all, so it's a jumping between them. So I've used this one, which is just the healing brush tool, and the clone stamp tool are the 2 main you're probably going to use in trying to remove any of these sort of bits that are lining up, and you choose whichever one you feel is going to be the best at hiding that edge. You want a soft edge tool so that there is no definite hard edge, and the bigger that is, the softer an overall impression it will give. You just have to keep on working on it, and lower down you may have problems again, especially if you've got buildings in your picture with edges, rooftops not matching, things like that, and pavements and walls coming into the picture which shouldn't be there. So you'd have to work on those, and over time hopefully you'll get something. Let's see if I've got it here, sky on the outside, something like that, which will give you a circle. In fact, I'll go to sky on the inside because that's exactly what I had before. I was showing you anyway, and you'd work on it, hiding the edge, and that one I've hidden to some degree, that funny edge that's coming down, and eventually I took this out. So you'd work around it, removing aspects, maybe working on the rooftops, and eventually you would have hopefully something like that. What I've also done, just to help hide the fact that there was an edge, especially in this particular picture where there was apparently a definite edge and you could kind of follow it with your eye up the middle of the photograph, was twist the photograph. So I've actually turned it, as you can see by the background here, it's turned so that my eye is taken to this chappie in the foreground that leads me into the picture, that takes me round using the bridge into the photograph and away from the work I've done on the photograph, which is actually here, the actual work area. So if I click on that one, you might see the work area was actually along this line, but because I've put it off center, it is more likely to hide it, because we're always looking for a pattern, and if it's in the center we're more likely to pick up on it. People might look at this and think, well, that's the line, but actually it wasn't, it was over here. So I'm kind of fooling people by taking their eye away, by moving the orange chappie in the foreground, leading you into the picture and so on, and taking you up to the bridge. So I'm fooling people and taking people away from the work I've done on the photograph. Okay. You may need to do that if you think that it helps in hiding any work you've done. This is quite a complicated picture because there was quite a lot going on in it. I have other versions which are simpler to work on because the ground would be the same or something. It's quite a complicated image to work on. So once you've got to this point and you've created your circle and you've worked on your photograph, it's a matter of just either flattening it as I've done and saving it as a JPEG, or you can keep a version, oh, where's the other one there, I'll keep a version which will allow you to have the white background and your picture on top, and then save that as a TIFF as well, or flatten it. And obviously at the moment it's a white background, but you could convert it to being a black background if you wish to. If it's not flattened, it's easy enough to do. Okay, that's basically how to do your tiny world. You're then just going to save it, and that's what people are going to see is a tiny world photograph in all its glory. Okay, thanks very much for watching, and hopefully this will have helped you produce something with a set of 11 or 12 photos. Thank you very much for watching.